Start with a blessing of studying Torah first. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Amen. Okay. So, does anybody not have the handout? Oh, I don't have to put it up on the screen. Okay. So if you look, I started with 2 quotes from the Torah, and this is the mystery of Serach. In the book of Genesis, this is like after, actually it was it's in this week's Parsha. No, this week or last week. I can't remember exactly where the story leaves off. When Joseph goes, sends for his father, Jacob, and says, everybody come to Egypt. There's going to be 5 more years of famine. Bring all your family. They list who comes up to Egypt. And the only granddaughter mentioned is Serach. And it says here, Asher, he's one of Jacob's sons. So Imnah, Ishva, Ishvi, and Beria, and their sister Serach. That's in Genesis 46:17. Now, in the book of Bamidbar, in the desert, so if it's in the desert, when was that? After the Exodus, 210 plus years later, it says the name of Asher's daughter was Serach, and she was listed among the people in the desert going to the land of Canaan. So there's a big question here. How could she have entered Egypt, and then over 200 years later, she's leaving Egypt? And so it's a huge discussion, and it's got wonderful explanations that we're going to read today because they're so amazing. And what I also want us to note is that, okay, these are all men, rabbis, writing these explanations, and they really honor Serach. They really imagine her as this wonderful, wise, mystical, ageless person. And at the end, they say that she's one of the few people who died and bodily went to heaven. I think it's the only woman who, didn't die and was buried, but literally, physically was like Moses and Elijah, literally ascended. So she has a lot of power, and they spin these wonderful possibilities of what happened to her. So I want to also tell you that you should look, whenever you have a question about a woman in Judaism, you should go to this great website. It's the Jewish Women's Archive. And there's a section called Midrash and Agada. Midrash are stories that rabbis wrote, explanations, and Agada are more like folk tales or myths, or, they're not quite as rooted in what the rabbis would say is text. They're just stories, but they're both fantastic. So let's just read the first, intro before Serach and Jacob, and you'll see how many things they say she did. There's no basis for this, but they are positive, and that's why it's so fantastic. And they're all great things. So would somebody like to read the intro, the first, 2 paragraphs there? Somebody read. Okay, Sue.
Serach, daughter of Asher, is mentioned in the Bible in the count of the Israelites who went down to Egypt, and in the enumeration of the Israelites at the steppes of Moab.
Which is right before going, it's near returning. Go ahead.
Aside from this, she takes no part in any narrative, nor is anything said about her. In contrast, a plethora of midrashic traditions exist about this woman, and thus the faceless biblical character becomes a fascinating personality. Her history is intertwined with the story of the migration to Egypt and enslavement, and with redemption and the return to Eretz Israel. She lived to an extremely old age and accordingly was blessed with much earthly wisdom and knowledge, which she used to help the people of Israel as needed, even during the time of the rabbis.
So they say she lived all the way till after, the destruction of the Second Temple, which is like 1,200 years that she lived because she was present. And we can't say, oh, it's another person named Sarah, because they both call her Asher's daughter. So she is considered the same person. So how is this possible? Because she's magical, because she's like a prophetess, because she has powers. Okay, so now we go into the Midrash and the stories and what she did. What was the first thing she did? So who would like to read about Sarah and Jacob? Jacob being her grandfather, Yaakov. Okay, Lori.
The Midrash speaks of Sarah's great beauty and wisdom. When Joseph was reunited with his brothers and sent them to the land of Canaan to bring his father Jacob to him in Egypt, he ordered them not to alarm their aged father. The brothers summoned Sarah and asked her to sit before Jacob and play for him on the lyre, in this manner revealing to him that Joseph was still alive. Sarah played well and sang gently, "Joseph, my uncle, did not die. He lives and rules all the land of Egypt."
So she took a lyre and sang to her grandfather, "Joseph, my uncle did not die." So that was the first thing that they said she did. The brothers were too afraid to approach their father and tell him. They didn't know the shock. So they got this granddaughter who was beautiful and wise to sing. She also had a beautiful voice and she was a musician. She could play the lyre. She's got such qualities. And she sang to him. Okay, read a little more, Lori.
She played thus for Jacob 2 and 3 times, and he was pleased by what he heard. Joy filled his heart. The Spirit of God rested on him, and he sensed the truth of her words. He bade her, "Continue to play for me, for you have heartened me with all that you have said."
Okay, so let's just think about this. I find it interesting. What do you make of the fact that the rabbis really don't speak this way of the women that we know about, like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, or Leah? They have all these complicated flaws, but they create this whole ideal of Sarah. What do you think they're trying to say about women? What would you think? What kind of, I'm going to give you the answer in the question because I don't know how to do it. Well, what kind of role model are they presenting for a woman to strive to be like, or should be? What's the ideal woman, according to Cindy?
Well, she's delivering shocking news, and they felt she could do it better than any of his sons could.
Exactly. So they said she's wise, she's musical, she's beautiful. I mean, who could live up to this? This is ideal. Yes, Sue Casa, you can live up to it. Yeah. So and so you're right, they were afraid, and so they sent her, which says a lot about these brothers, and how the Midrash viewed these brothers. Okay, so who wants to, then this is what happened. So who wants to read the next section?
I'll read.
Okay.
While he was speaking with her, his sons came to him with horses, chariots, and royal garments, with slaves running before them, and told him, "We bring glad tidings, for Joseph still lives, and he rules all the land of Egypt." When Jacob saw all that Joseph had sent, he knew that they spoke truthfully. He was exceedingly happy, and he said, "This is enough for me. My son Joseph is still alive. I must go and see him before I die." Although Genesis lists Sarah among the 70 members of Jacob's family who went to Egypt, the rabbis observed that the count of the names in Genesis 46 totals only 69. Logic would dictate that Jacob himself completed the count of 70 souls, but the Midrash maintains that Sarah was the 70th member of the Israelite party.
Well, this is interesting because next time we're going to look at Yocheved. How did she know that Jacob was alive? Because they told her he was alive, and then she sang it to them. They told her what to sing. Sue, unmute and ask if you have a question. You're muted. You're muted.
I just thought that while he was speaking with her, the sons came back with all the goodies. So she must have talked to him before the sons came back.
No, she's saying to him.
Yeah, but I'm saying she sang to him before the sons came back. So how did she know?
No. They were like standing in the background waiting to see if how he would. They were like hovering around the corner, so to speak, waiting. And when he said, "Continue to play for me, for you have heartened me," then they came running with all the gifts. These things that they had in the text, Joseph sends with them to his father. So they bring everything now. This is what he gave us. And what I wanted to tell you is next time we're going to look at Yocheved, who is Moses's mother. And they say that she lived and one of the ones who came from, she's the 70th. In another midrash, she's the 70th person, Yocheved, not Sarah, she's not mentioned, but she came, they say, and lived. Also, they attribute to her. There's this running thing with these two women, which is really interesting that we can analyze after we've read both. Okay, so she went up and, okay, so now Sarah, according to the midrash, has lived all through the wealthy times, through Joseph's death, all through Pharaoh now enslaving the Hebrews, all through Moses going away and coming back when he was 80 years old, and now and all through the plagues. She has been through all of that according to them. And by the way, there's something in the text you should know. When Jacob, just before he dies, this isn't this week's Torah portion, he says, "Don't bury me in Egypt, please bury me back home in Canaan." And so they take this huge delegation, this huge procession. They go back and they bury him in the cave of Machpelah, where Abraham and Sarah are buried, and where Isaac and Rebekah, and where Leah is there. Rachel's not there. Okay. Does anyone know? I think, Cindy, you know a lot about Torah. What did Joseph say when he was dying? Do you know what he asked of his family? Does anyone know?
That they carry his bones to Israel when they get there.
Yeah. When you leave, when you return, don't leave me in Egypt. Take my bones. So now the midrash jumps to, okay, it's 210 or more. Let's say it's 250 years later. Sarah is still there. Where are Joseph's bones? No one knows where his bones are, but Sarah knows. So now we go to how they go to Sarah. So who wants to read about Moses and Sarah? We have Jacob and Sarah, now Moses and Sarah. Who would like to read?
I'll read.
Okay, Risa.
The rabbis assigned to Sarah an important role in identifying Moses as the Redeemer.
Oh yeah, that's first. Go ahead.
Who would deliver the Israelites from Egypt. The Midrash relates that the secret of redemption was given over to Abraham, who conveyed it to Isaac, Isaac to Jacob, and Jacob to Joseph. Joseph transmitted the secret of redemption to his brothers, telling them, "When God has taken notice of you, you shall carry up my bones from here." And Asher passed it along to his daughter, Sarah.
Okay, now in the text, when Moses goes and finds the burning bit, this expression, pakod yivkod, he will point and he will notice when Moses, God speaks to Moses through the burning bush, he says these words, "I have noticed the suffering of my people, and now I want you to go down." So he said to Moses these words, I've taken notice of the suffering of my people. Okay, continue.
When Moses and Aaron came to the Israelite elders and performed miracles before them, they went to Sarah and told her, "A certain man has come to us and performed such and such wonders." She replied, "There is no substance to him. That is, he is not the deliverer." Then they said to her, "He also said, When God has taken notice of you, Bakod Yivkod, she said, this is the man who will redeem Israel from Egypt. For I heard from my father, he will take notice.
He will use that expression, Bakod Yivkod in Hebrew.
Bakod Yivkod.
So the Israelite elders go to this woman who's ancient, but probably because we know all the old women stay young in these stories, like Sarah was 90 and gave birth, and they said God rebuilt her womb and she was young and beautiful. So she says, okay, he's the one, he's the Redeemer. And I love the Midrash saying that from Abraham, they already knew there would be a Redeemer, which means, yes, Cindy.
How much later is Moses than Joseph? Isn't it hundreds of years?
Yeah, 210 years or longer.
But I thought they were slaves like 400 or 500 years.
You know, there's some that say 210, some say 400. It's either way, there's two different understandings.
He's either 210 or 400 years old.
400 years. No, she came from Canaan. So she was already, let's say, in her 20s when she got there. They weren't enslaved right away.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
So she's like 450 or something like that. Okay, but they went to her. Okay. All right, finish this, Risa, this part.
The people immediately believed in their God and his agent, as it is said, and the people were convinced when they heard that the Lord had taken note of the Israelites.
Right. So there's that word pekad,
Pakad.
in all of this, which is like how the rabbis understand that Moses was recognized by, okay. Now, this is the part I was talking about. This is another fantastic thing that Serach does. Now Serach is an advisor to Moses. Now he goes to her for some help. Everybody goes to Serach. I love her. It's a great name for a daughter, a Hebrew name, Serach, I think. And it's very unknown. Okay. Yeah, it would be a beautiful Hebrew name, I think. Who would like to read? Okay, Merle.
And wait a minute. Okay. In this midrashic account, Sarah helps Moses to fulfill the oath sworn to Joseph to carry up his bones. When the Israelites were ready to leave Egypt, they were occupied in taking booty. And Moses was the only one who was engaged with Joseph's bones. He searched for his coffin in all the land of Egypt and could not locate it. Sarah was the only one in the generation still alive. Moses went to her and asked, "Do you know where Joseph is buried?" She answered, "They placed him here. The Egyptians made for him a metal coffin and it sunk it in the Nile so that its waters would be blessed."
So they wanted to keep his power of blessing and whatever. So they didn't want him to leave. So they put him in a metal coffin and they sunk it in the middle of the Nile River. Now, by the way, I read when I was reading about this, that the Egyptians were the first and for hundreds of years, the only society that had coffins for their dead. Everybody else just, wrapped them up in a sheet, or even Jews, you put in a shroud, you put in the earth, or, but the Egyptians had coffins, but they wanted, and we know how long their coffins can last, with embalming and forever. They did not want Joseph to ever leave. They thought he brought good luck. So now here's Moses's special power. Continue, Merle.
Okay, where am I now? Joseph's
Now, Moses then went to the Nile.
Oh, Moses then went to the Nile, stood on the bank and shouted, "Joseph, Joseph, the time has come for the oath that God swore to our father Abraham, that he will redeem his children. Give honor to the Lord and God of Israel. And do not delay your redemption, because we are delayed on your account. If you show yourself, it will be well. And if not, then we are free from your oath. If you will not raise your coffin, we will go forth from Egypt and leave you here." Joseph's coffin immediately rose to the surface. And this is hard to read.
It's great. It's so great.
This led the rabbis to state that search delivered
Sarah.
Sarah, wait a minute. Sarah delivered the faithful one to the faithful one, since she gave Joseph over to Moses when they departed from Egypt.
Okay, so now, Risa, I love your face. What are you thinking?
This is a way out midrash.
Isn't it great? You know,
Yeah, try reading it.
it's on the Chabad website. This is from
That makes sense then.
No, but this is from the Jewish Women's Archive. This is, real. They compile all the midrashim about a woman that there are, and
they compiled it from Chabad.
No. Chabad also has it, but here it says it's from Genesis Rabbah. So every book of the Bible, of the Torah, has its own book of midrash, and that book is a Rabbah. So Genesis Rabbah is all the midrash of Rabbah, or Bereshit Rabbah, and then Exodus Rabbah is all the midrashim for the book of Exodus. This is definitely in the midrash that Sarah knew where it was, and Moses said, Joseph, come on, and the coffin popped up out of the Nile, and they took it.
And he'd been dead for several hundred years.
Yeah.
And he could raise his coffin. It's amazing.
The coffin raised itself. I mean, it came up.
It had to have been his power that made it raise. I mean,
yes, Joseph's power or Moses' power, whatever. But the rabbis also give Sarah some credit because she knew where it was and maybe told him what to do. Okay, so then in the next paragraph, which I'm going to read, according to the rabbis, not only was Sarah among those who came to Egypt and one of those who left it, she also entered Eretz Yisrael, and they use a proof text for the latter claim, that the one I gave you, that includes Sarah among the names of those entering the land. So now she's alive for like 400 or 500 years. But she also lived during the time of King David, which is another, how many years? Another like 250 years later, or 200 years later. So who would like to read about Sarah and King David? Who hasn't read? Come on, somebody read. Okay, Cindy.
An additional tradition of Sirach's longevity has her still alive at the time of King David and identifies her with the wise woman of Abel Beth Makkah. When Joab, David's military commander, asked her, "Who are you?" she replied, "I am one of those who seek the welfare of the faithful in Israel." In the rabbinical exegesis, she is saying to Joab, "I am one of the Israelites who went down to Egypt with Jacob. I completed the count of Israel, Imune Israel, a wordplay on the root
Shalom,
referring both to peace, welfare, and completion, to the 70 souls that went down to Egypt. Do you want to kill the entire city and also me? Who am I, an important woman?" In this manner, Sirach saved the lives of all the inhabitants of her town.
Okay, so they also keep her alive at the time of King David, which was like 1100 BCE or 1050 BCE, and the Exodus was 1200 BCE, and the entrance into Egypt was like either 14 or 1600 BCE. So,
Rabbi?
Yes.
Does it, in the beginning of the paragraph, where it says, when Joab, David's military commander, asked her, "Who are you?" she replied, that's actually in 2 Samuel?
Yes. But she doesn't say I'm Sarah. There, she's identified as the wise woman of Abel Bet Makkah.
Oh, but how
the rabbis say, you see, this is Sarah.
Okay, I see. Okay, now I get it.
Yeah, they say it's Sarah.
Okay.
They find Sarah everywhere.
Okay, so I have a question.
Yes.
Is she actually everywhere and actually 400 or 500 years old, or is she sort of reincarnated in different people throughout time?
Okay, well, the rabbis, this is a midrash. A midrash, is kind of a folktale or a
Fill in the
speculation or a, what would you call it, Risa?
Fill in the blanks.
A fill in the blanks. Oh, exactly. Okay.
You just have to
So-
be reminded that it's a midrash, so it's a
So midrash
story.
is a story. But what you missed,
Adventure.
Leslie, you came a little bit late, so this
I
is the
know,
part-
sorry.
No, that's okay. In the text on the first page, it counts Sarah as the daughter of Asher, which is one of Jacob's daughters, as entering the land of Egypt with her when all of the Israelites went back to Egypt to see Joseph. After Joseph revealed himself, they all moved to Egypt for a good life. But her name, same exact one, Sarah, daughter of Asher, is counted as one who entered the land of Israel after the Exodus, which means she lived hundreds of years. So the rabbis go, how could that be? Because that's what it says in the text. The Sarah, daughter of Asher, went in, and Sarah, daughter of Asher, was in the desert about to enter in the land, which is after the Exodus, after the slavery, after Mount Sinai, after everything. So they came up with all these wonderful explanations. She has magical powers. She lives, for hundreds of years. She's a wise woman. She's, so literally, I don't think we can take this literally, but we can enjoy all of the gifts that they endowed on this woman, all of the talents, the wisdom. Yeah, Risa?
The women's commentary has a note here that says that Jacob gave her magical powers as a blessing because she told him the truth about Joseph.
Yes. Okay. There you go.
There's another explanation.
So Jacob
She's
gave
magic.
her. Yeah, she has magical. Jacob gave. So where did he get them from? Since he was such
He's
a mess.
Jacob.
Yeah, he's such a mess, Jacob. My opinion. Okay. So now we're going to look at this. So now she's even discussed in the Talmud, which is like 1,000 years later. And they say she appears to answer a question. She appears. So let's look at this longevity and death. Then the next page. Who would like to read?
I will read.
Susan.
The tradition of Sarah's immortality is also reflected in a narrative set in the time of the rabbis, in which Sarah appears to resolve a disagreement in the academy. Rabbi Yohanan was sitting in the Beit Midrash and expounding the verse in Exodus, the waters forming a wall for them on their right and on their left. How could the water become as a wall?
Okay, so they were studying the idea of the splitting of the Red Sea and that the waters were on the left and on the right. And it says in the text, the waters forming a wall for them on their right and on their left is what it actually says in the Torah. So they're saying, what does this mean? Because this is what the Talmudic rabbis do. They look at the Torah and then they talk about it for like a month at least. How could it be? And so this was his answer. Keep going, Susan.
Yohanan expounded that it was a sort of a net. Sarah appeared and said, I was there, and the water was not as a net, but as transparent windows.
Keep going.
In this midrashic vignette, Sarah is an extremely old woman. That answers your question earlier, who can testify in the first person to the miracle of the parting of the Red Sea. In her wisdom, she is capable of comprehending and participating in the Adamic discussion conducted in the Beit Midrash. Her statement is preferred to that of Rabbi Yochanan, since she has firsthand knowledge of the fact.
So this is in the Talmud. Can you believe this? Or
There's an older woman.
or in a discussion of the Pesifta de Rav Kahana, which may be like a commentary on the Talmud. But basically, it's written down that the rabbis were discussing this, and Sarah appeared, and she corrected Rabbi Yochanan, and the rest of the rabbis went with Sarah's explanation over that of Rabbi Yochanan. She says, I was there. It wasn't a net. It was like a window. So Sarah knows all. I just love her. I love Sarah. She's so smart, and she's everywhere. And the rabbis keep bringing her to answer difficult questions. Like, she knows where Joseph is buried. She knows that Moses is the Redeemer. She's the one who tells Jacob, that Joseph is still alive. They give her such amazing powers or abilities or honoring her with all of this knowledge and these seminal events. So she's revered. It's interesting that she's so revered. Okay. Anybody have any comments or thoughts about Sarah so far? Anything?
She's making pronouncements, but she's not engaging in discussion with anyone. There's nothing that says, and Sarah said, or, it's all, and they responded.
Right.
They just take what she says.
It's true. No one argues with her.
No one.
She has the final say.
I like that.
She said I was there.
Yeah. But it's like the elders say, is this the Redeemer? Should we trust this Moses? And she goes,
Yes.
Oh, let me hear. Yes. This is the one. Is this where it is? Yes, this is where it is. She's great. Okay.
But I have a comment.
This is fun.
So sometimes, reading through the Talmud, very few and far between, these women will pop up, and they're always very wise. And sometimes the rabbis go to them for counsel, which, I found astonishing. But now we're reading this, it makes sense in a way, as they're going to these women and they give them this wisdom, as if they're settling arguments. They can't settle, or they're like these arbiters of super partes, kind of. So like they argue all the time, and someone usually takes precedence and something becomes halakha. But sometimes they go to these women, and what these women say is accepted, as if they're settling disputes that they can't settle, or I don't know. I just find it enormously fascinating.
I do too. Because women weren't supposed to study Talmud. They didn't teach their daughters Talmud. And yet these women would arise. There was a woman, I taught this when we were in one of my other classes in Sfat in the 16th century, named Francesca Sara, who she could foretell the future, and she was a medium. There was like I don't know what you call it. You're a medium and somebody's speaking through you. And she's written in the diaries of Chaim Vital, who was the Ari's biographer. And they went to her, and whatever she said, they also listened to and believed. And she was very well respected in Sfat as a mystic. So
what about Breweria?
Oh, and Breweria, for sure. Breweria was a great, but they brought her down, at the end, according to a story. We don't know that it ever really happened. But Breweria, I've taught her before. She was the wife of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir was a student of Rabbi Akiva, who was one of the greatest Talmudic scholars, and Rabbi Meir was considered quite great. And they said his wife Breweria was so smart she could study and explain 300 sections of Talmud in one day. She was brilliant in every way, and the men were very jealous of her. And there's this mention in the Talmud of what's called the Breweria Incident. That's all it says. And then there was the Breweria Incident, and Rabbi Meir and maybe Breweria, they moved to Babylonia from Israel. But they don't say anything. What was the Breweria Incident? So you have to know that. And then Rashi, and I have a problem with this, but Rashi said the Breweria Incident was, now Rashi lived in 1000 CE or AD. Breweria lived in 200 or 165 AD or CE. So we're talking 850 years later. Rashi says the Breweria Incident was that men at the academy said women are like-minded. And she said, that's not true at all. Women are not like-minded. That's ridiculous. And so her husband agreed to test her, and they had a student try to seduce her. And he really tried really hard. and he did seduce her, and she slept with him. This is all Rashi. And when it was revealed, Breweria committed suicide and hanged herself in disgrace. I don't believe it at all. It's like they had to bring her down. She was too brilliant. And in fact, another alternative story is more likely that Breweria's sister and mother were captured by the Romans, and her sister had been made into a prostitute. And she sent Rabbi Meir to Rome, and he got her out. He found her and they escaped. And after that, they all had to run to Babylonia because the Romans were after them. Because all we know is that they moved to Babylonia, or he moved to Babylonia. They don't know why. And this is what Rashi comes up with, which I'm very disappointed in Rashi coming up with that.
I agree that Susan also, I definitely agree with that, and I don't like Rashi's. They could have also just left Yerushalayim because it was a bad time. You know, I mean, with the Romans were killing people.
Exactly. But that was the story. Those are the two, possibilities. But this, all it says is the Breweria Incident, and then Rashi fills in the blanks.
Yeah, and Babylonia was a center that became a better, a more vibrant center for Jewish learning. So I mean,
absolutely. And maybe, some of you may know this, some of you may not. There are two sets of Talmuds. One was called the Jerusalem Talmud by the rabbis who lived in Jerusalem, and one is called the Babylonian Talmud, is by this incredible academy in Sura in Babylonia, where this other set of Talmud. And today we hold by the Babylonian Talmud. It is considered far superior to the Jerusalem Talmud, or the Jerusalem or Palestinian Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud is the one that we use. So those were the scholars. And you're right, he could have just moved, because after Rabbi Akiva was tortured and killed, which is his teacher, maybe he said, it's time to get the heck out of here. And they moved to Babylonia. There are many reasons, but I do not believe that Breweria cheated on Rabbi Meir and then hanged herself, and that they tested her out of spite. I don't buy it.
also,
Neither should you.
yeah, right. Also, I want to say that women have been credited with mystical powers. I mean, in fact, got to a horrible proportion with the Christianity, with the Salem witch trials and the like, but of having mystical powers. And I think some of it was because women have contact with life, giving life.
Well, a lot of that was also they knew medicine, they knew herbology and all that stuff.
Right.
But here they're saying she lived for hundreds and hundreds of years, and she was an authority on all of these interesting things, and nobody was persecuting Sarah. They were honoring her. But there's even more to Sarah. So
I have a quick question or commentary. I wonder,
Sure.
Do they have to say that women who are really special or magical or have spiritual powers or were given spiritual powers because a woman simply couldn't have that on her own?
I don't think so. I think in this case, because in the text, it actually is written that she lived before they went into Egypt, and that she came out of Egypt like hundreds of years later. The rabbis are going exactly what Risa said. They're filling in the blanks, and they could fill it in any way they want, and they fill it in with very positive, beautiful attributes. I mean, there are men, Elijah had magical powers. I mean, there are other there are men too, but there are a lot of women, like the Witch of Endor actually is another one, which we will get to. But they just attributed this to her. I think it's a huge compliment, because they could have explained it in many ways. How come she's mentioned in the beginning and 200 years later she's still alive? They filled in the blanks with, she was beautiful and wise, and she's the one who told Jacob about Joseph's being alive, and she's the one who recognized Moses. They give her a lot of beautiful attributes. So in this case, I think it's kind of amazing how much they're giving her. But let's go on, because they even give her a little more. Okay, longevity and death. We read that. The traditions of Serach's extreme longevity apparently have their basis in the fact that she is mentioned both in the count of those who went to Egypt and those who entered Eretz Yisrael. Her singular name may also have contributed to those traditions, since the meaning of the expression Serach ha'odef is something left over, or the overlapping excess. So it means like she's still there. She's still there. Okay, all right, why don't you read, Leslie? This evolved into the tradition.
This evolved into the tradition that Serach lived for hundreds of years, was in the presence of both Joseph and Moses, and was even one of those who entered the land of Canaan. In the development of this tradition, her lifetime extended to the period of King David, and the later traditions claim that she never died at all, but entered the Garden of Eden while still alive. In the late Midrash, Jacob is the one who blessed Sarah that she would live forever, telling her, "My daughter, because you revived my spirit, death shall never rule you."
Keep going.
The character of Sarah, who accompanies the Israelites to Egypt and enters the land of Canaan with them, embodies the history of the people of Israel. Her character is linked with those of the people's leaders, and she expedites the realization of the divine plan. This is her role when she convinces Jacob that Joseph still lives, thus resulting in his going down to Egypt. She continues in this task when she identifies Moses as the true redeemer of Israel, thus leading the people to heed him. And thus, when she helps Moses to find Joseph's bones so as not to delay the exodus from Egypt. Serach's appearance seemingly confirms that God's promises will be fulfilled and that the people of Israel will leave Egypt and come to and take possession of the promised land.
So she's quite extraordinary.
Man.
Now, I found in the Chabad website another tradition. Everything else in the Chabad website is similar to what we read in the Jewish Women's Archive. But I found this, that she lived even longer. According to another tradition, Sarah lived right up to the time of the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash, which is the first temple. And she was one of the exiles who went to Babylon. Together with many other Jews, she settled in Isfahan, now in Iran, where she died and was buried. A Muslim traveler who lived some 700 years ago related how his visit to that city and what he heard about the way the Jews had settled there. According to his story, the Jews who fled from Nebuchadnezzar, that's the king of Babylonia, took with them from Jerusalem some of the water and soil of the holy city. After long wandering, they came to Isfahan, where they found water and soil of the same high quality. So they settled there, built homes, and raised families. The Jewish quarter was called Al Yehudiya. Near that city, which is a city of Persia, in a town called Lingan, is the tomb of Serach, which is known to many Jews. Well, and many years ago, the tomb belonged to the Jews, although it was held sacred also by the Muslims. Later, the Persians took over the sacred tomb, and many legends are current there in connection with the tomb. So there's a tomb of Serach in the town of Lingan in Iran.
How does she fit in with the Muslims?
I don't know. I guess because they lived there at the time, that Muslim, I guess. I don't know because Persia was never Muslim. It says no. The tomb belonged to the Jews, although it was held sacred also by the Muslims. I have no idea. That's what they said. That's wrong because there never were. Well, there were Muslims actually in Persia. They became Muslim at some point. But I guess her fame, expanded to Persia and to the Muslim world or whatever. But here's this amazing woman that the rabbis basically imagined and created and visualized as someone who, and I mean, it's that she didn't even die. She went bodily to the Garden of Eden, which is like heaven, which I don't think any other woman is mentioned like that. So I feel like this is very heartening that Sarah existed, that she's written about. And until I was going to teach it to you, I didn't know all the stories about her, but she's quite extraordinary woman. Any questions or comments about Sarah? Risa, did you want to say something?
No, I'm just looking to see why do Muslims consider Sarah's tomb as sacred?
And do you find anything?
Got the questions. I'm looking.
Well, it was a huge community in Isfahan.
Of Jews?
Yeah, in the there's still a Jewish quarter that you can visit. So obviously, it was a really big community, and it was at the time of the deportations of the Jews by the Neo-Syrian and Neo-Babylonian kingdoms in the first millennium BCE. So if there's still a Jewish quarter that you can still visit now, probably there was like lore or
Well, I would imagine
intermingling.
after, the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, and the elite Israelites and the large population were taken to Babylonia as captives. 70 years later, Babylonia was conquered by Persia. And then the king of Persia, Cyrus the Great, said, you Jews can go back to your country. And he let them go back. Some did not go. They stayed in Babylonia, and there were Jews in Iraq, which is Babylonia, until 1950 or 52, which is when Iraq kicked out all their Jews. But there were Jews from 586 BCE till 1952. Okay. It's not hard to imagine that some Jews went to Iran or Persia for trading or whatever, when they were so, open to Jews and Jewish freedom and whatever. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there was a Persian Jewish community since 400 BCE or something like that, that had been there. Because, and I think we Ashkenazi Jews, and I think this is something I'd like to offer a course on this. I don't think we know very much about Persian Jews. I don't think we know their history. I don't think we know their customs. I don't think we know anything about them. And we have a huge community here in Los Angeles, and they're very interesting, and they're Jewish, and they're very soulful, and they have a whole other. My hairdresser is a Persian Jewish woman. I love her. And we were talking yesterday. She was talking about this Persian women, they want to gossip all the time, and she doesn't like it. And then I said, there's a word, she'd never heard this word before. It's yenta. Yenta. Oh, that's interesting. Never heard the word before. So it's it's different. I mean, we're like, I think we're poorer for not knowing all the Jewish culture of Persian Jews, and I want to change that. I mean, they're a huge, especially in LA, and it's lots of them, and it's very, very interesting. So I think that's something I'm going to offer next in the winter, something on that as well.
FYI, Google says that the only people who say that Sarah is considered sacred by the Muslims is the Chabad. And then they don't have one other word to say about Sarah. It's like Google doesn't know Sarah.
Oh, okay.
Very funny.
Yeah, well, Google does if you go to Jewish Women Archive, then I got
That's different. Jewish Women Archive knows it all.
Do Muslims believe in mysticism or in storytelling?
Sufi is a kind of Islam, is kind of Muslim.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. Sue, Casa, were you going to say something? You're muted.
Muhammad went up and down. Remember, he had his midnight flight from the mount, the Temple Mount. That's what
well, that kind of mysticism, like Muhammad bodily rose. It's interesting about bodily rising in traditions. Like Jesus bodily rose to heaven, Muhammad bodily rose on his horse to heaven. And, we have Elijah who rose to heaven bodily. And maybe some others. So there's this, it's similar, idea. So next time I want to talk about the 5 women who saved Moses. Without these 5 women, Moses would never have survived. Does anybody know who the 5 women are? Just do a little intro.
Miriam
was his sister.
Batya, who rescued him.
Batya was her name, and that was they call her Batya or Bithya. That was Pharaoh's daughter, rescued him. So that's 2.
The midwives?
The two midwives,
Pua and Shifra.
Pura and Shifra, and
Right.
His mother?
his
Yahovah?
mother.
Yocheved.
Yocheved. All those women. There's amazing midrashim about Miriam, of course, but I didn't know, and we're going to start with Yocheved next time. Yocheved, also there's midrashim about her and her powers and her fertility. And then one of the things I read, see, I love teaching this because I learned so much.
You learn.
According to the midrash, Yocheved was 130 years old when she gave birth to Moses.
How does Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, you know, older mothers. Let's hear it for older mothers. And it's the only
Way
one
older.
way older. The only mother who died in childbirth was Rachel. You know, she was the only one who died in childbirth. So, however, Rachel's tomb, it's in Hebron. Is it in Hebron, Risa? Rachel's tomb?
No.
She's on the way.
It's on the way to Bethlehem.
On the way to Bethlehem, right.
She didn't make it to Machpelah.
She didn't make it to the Machpelah.
Right.
There's a midrash about Jacob explaining and apologizing to Joseph about his mother not making it to the cave where everybody else was because this is after the fact. She stands with a pillar and she's a symbol of hope. Well, she's a symbol of fertility in that women who are barren go to her tomb and pray to get pregnant, and they wrap red string around her. But also, apparently, when the Jews were being taken on to exile to Babylonia, they passed her tomb and they said, Rachel, cry for us and pray for us. And they prayed. So she was a symbol of, I guess, redemption from sorrow. Like she had sorrow and then redemption. So that's what her tomb stands for. And it's interesting that in the Jewish tradition, you go for solace to women, comfort to women, for blessings, you go to a lot of women, except, a few big rabbis like Rabbi Nachman, I think people go to him. And now I guess the Chabad Rabbi Schneerson, people go to his thing. So I don't want to start another class. We're a little early, but I feel like we're filled with Sarah. Great name for a granddaughter. Hebrew name. You don't have to name her in English. I wish I had known about her. I might have given it to her.
I'm going to tell my son. I'm going to tell my son, though, he's 19, so please God, not yet. But his name is Asher.
Oh my God, yes. You have to tell him about Sarah, and she was his daughter, and that's beautiful. And so may we all be inspired by Sarah and realize our potential. We could all be like that. We should only live that long, right?
Amen. I don't think so.
No.
I don't know if I want to live that long.
Well, if you're young and beautiful for most of the time, like she
And
was.
that's okay.
Yeah.
When are you starting? Would you repeat when you're starting again and which days?
It'll be on Wednesday. I'm not sure. I have to have Hannah. We'll tell Hannah. Do you know when we're starting again? Are you there, Hannah?
So
I don't know when we're starting again.
We'll announce it. It'll
Yeah.
be probably the second week in January.
Okay, so we're done for now.
For now, until
Susan, can I ask you an extraneous question for a moment? Before you regret not calling your daughter Sarah, could you please ask her what she thinks of it and would she
of what?
Would she have wanted that name?
A Hebrew name. As a Hebrew, only for a
Not
Hebrew
as
name.
her English name. Oh, okay.
No.
Good.
I think but it would have been a cool Hebrew name. I wouldn't. It's too weird. Sarah. Nobody would. They'd call her Sarich.
Okay, good. Thought you meant as an English.
Very.
No. But I think it's a Hebrew name. I mean, maybe my Hebrew name is Sarah. Maybe I'll change it.
Everyone's going to ask you about the strange spelling. So with the E instead of the A.
Yeah. Oh, Sarah. It's actually an X. Sarah.
That is an E. It's a goal.
It's a goal.
This is a goal,
Sarah.
right?
But Sarah. I mean, Sarah though. All right, everybody have a
Okay.
beautiful, happy New Year.
Happy secular New Year.
Thank
Great to
you.
be with you.
Happy New Year. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
fun.
This
you.
was a lot of
Bye.
fun.
Thank you.
And do it
Have a good
again.
week.
We will do it again.
Great.
Be well.